I am Matt.
Hey Graham, great to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome everyone to Crazy in Love, the podcast where two therapists talk about all things to do with relationships. Matt, generally, you like these podcasts to be, as you describe them, timeless, to not have a time code. But today,
Don't remember
given
that.
we're given we're it's quite highfalutin of you, isn't it? Given it's the 23rd of December when we're recording this, we're looking at New Year's resolutions, and we're going to be releasing this kind of just pretty much at New Year. So I thought today we could talk about New Year's resolutions for couples, for relationships. You initially thought that was a terrible idea, but I think you're coming around to it. Talk us through that transition.
I suppose New Year's resolutions tend to be a bit rubbish, don't they? Tend to be sort of fluff. They tend to be promises that you make on one day when you wouldn't do the thing, with the idea that in 2 weeks' time or whatever the time frame is, you'll be so much more motivated and able to do it. So they sort of famously they don't really survive their impact with reality. And
Yeah,
they tend to
let's
be a bit, sorry, you say.
No, let's start there. Let's start at kind of what's wrong with New Year's resolutions, and then maybe we can then segue into, okay, how would you get them right in the context of a relationship, given what we know about habit change and about personal responsibility across resolutions and commitments to the self more generally.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to say a bit more about what the research says on this, and you're probably a little
Is that
closer
because
to
you don't know it? So
that. I was just going to say something at kind of headline view would be they're unrealistic and they're vague, aren't they? They're sort of vague and heroic, is how I would describe a lot of my least successful New Year's resolutions, or the ones that I sometimes hear from clients. They're going to be in the gym 4 or 5 days a week at 6:30, and so I doubt it, to be
yeah,
honest. And you're probably better off having a more modest but realistic expectation. So I think that's why some of those things fail. They're sort of they're either vague, or they're a bit heroic, or they're some combination of both. And I suppose that can happen in it can happen in relationships as well. We can make we think we're going to transform something, or we're going to be very, very different. You're still going to be tired on a Tuesday evening when you come home from work. So that's the thing I would target. If that's when the rows happen at the end of a
yeah,
busy day, or we don't really feel like going out together sometimes on a date night or whatever it is, because the kids' bedtime routines, or because one of us sometimes gets caught at work, or because it's difficult to arrange a sitter or whatever, that stuff needs to be reckoned with rather than just sort of wished away. And we should definitely go out in the new year.
mm.
We should definitely go out once a week, and we should always that kind of thing.
Yeah, good. I think if I'd summarize the kind of the decent evidence on habit change and
Mm.
resolutions, it would be a number of things. It would be focus on the process rather than the outcome. So
Yeah,
don't worry so much about whether you're going to run a marathon. Just start running. Just get out there,
yeah,
even if it's 5 minutes. Don't worry about getting the promotion. Just focus on doing better at your own job, for example. It's things like that. It's
yeah,
starting small. So
yeah,
like building on your point, you're not going to say go to the gym 5 days a week. You're just going to say get to the gym once every week. And you're
yeah,
not going to worry about how long you're even there for or what you do when you're there. So you're not going to say my outcome is to get ripped. I'm just going
yeah,
to become someone. And this is the second point, which is around kind of identity that can help. I'm going to become someone that goes to the gym. I'm going to become a runner. So there's an identity formation point there. I think
yeah,
maybe the third point is kind of the architecture of your life. So it's getting the gym, it's
yeah,
making it easy, reducing the friction to the habit change. So it's getting the gym kit out the night before. So you're only having to deal with a tiny moment of discomfort first thing in the morning. You're not having to get yourself out of bed, find your
yeah,
kit, put your wet shoes on in the morning. You're having to deal with a maybe 5 seconds of discomfort getting yourself out of the bed, getting into the bathroom, putting your gym kit on, getting into the car. That's the only
yeah.
real bit of discomfort you've got to fight through. So a range of
Yeah.
different things that kind
Yeah.
of make it easy for you to get started and mean if you do fall off the horse, you get back on the horse pretty quickly as well, rather than thinking, oh crap, I'm never going to run a marathon. Why have I even started?
Yeah, you could do all of those things reluctantly as well. Sometimes the thing I talk to with my clients is, isn't really, you're not going to feel motivated. It doesn't really matter whether you want to go. It's the going anyway. And if you're waiting for the feelings to turn up, you probably got the cart before the horse, and the
Yeah.
feelings might well show up afterwards. And sometimes they don't, frankly. You go to the gym and it wasn't an inspiring session and you didn't really feel it, and you don't come back
No.
feeling transformed. Sometimes you do. Often you do feel good. Legs are heavy for a while, and then you settle into the rhythm, or you do get something out of it, and genuinely something chemical is happening within the body. But there are those moments where you're just like, didn't really
Yeah.
feel that, but you've
Yeah.
still banked something. Very few people come away from taking a walk, early morning swim or run and think, I wish I'd not done that. I really, really wish I'd not gone out and done that.
Yeah, that's good. I think there are ways that you can game a bit of motivation on there around, I think of myself during lockdown, and I used to get on the elliptical in my bedroom and watch an episode of The Sopranos every day. Like that was my 45 minutes of I'm going
Yeah.
to do some exercise, but I'm going to make it as interesting and fun as possible. So I'm just not
Yeah.
staring at the wall while I do it and having to fight my thoughts. I'm going to
Yeah.
do the one thing that day that is for me, that I want to
Yeah.
do, that is interesting. I think
Yeah,
you
I
can
think
game.
is it it's probably Katie Milkman, unusual sounding name, but that is a genuine person and a genuine expert in this area. She talks about saving up your podcast for, or
Yeah, exactly.
the book for the gym, so that you're linking and tying those two things together, which I think is
Yeah.
is quite good advice.
Yeah.
Query, whether it's the people who are good at doing those things that can do that anyway.
Yeah,
It's a
well,
bit
the
like,
causation is the wrong way around. Yeah, there's for a lot of people. I'm not one of these, but a lot of people want to tie other people to it. Maybe we
sure.
could draw that into
Yeah.
relationships, which is find yourself a running partner, find
Yeah.
yourself someone who you've got the external commitment towards, personal trainer or coach or a
Yeah.
friend who you go running with. There might be something in that that's relevant for relationships, right? You might be making these resolutions together, for example, and
Yeah.
sharing that commitment about what we're going to work towards in the new year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're all decent enough ideas. I mean, in the end, it's about behavioral change, or it's about nothing, isn't it? So I think whatever it is you're suggesting you're going to do, the things I like least are sort of communicate better or be more romantic, because I don't know how you specify that. If you can't put that as a time slot in the diary, I think it's unlikely to issue in anything truthfully. And I think
But it
something,
probably starts there, though, doesn't it? It starts
sure,
with kind of what do we need to do better, and a shared sense of, oh, I think we need to carve out more time together. Okay, more time together to do
to
what?
do.
What is it
Yeah,
that you're missing? Is
yeah,
it that you
yeah,
don't feel like we're getting time to talk together, or you feel like
yeah,
you want to go out and do stuff? Like
yeah.
there's a series of questions that start from those more vague premises that we need to
Yeah.
communicate better, for example.
Yeah, I think it can be a really nice thing to talk about in a couple, and I think it can be
Yeah.
a really nice thing to take individual action on as well. I think sometimes what's missing in the relationship is a bit of drive, or the other person's spontaneity, or their good ideas, things that couples often miss about the start phase of a relationship is less around the novelty and the newness, and as much around the kind of energy and purpose that you both had. You wanted to please one another, you wanted to amuse one another, you wanted to be seen as someone who was funny and capable, and had a lot going on, and you can bring that to the relationship as well. So I think sometimes couples think talking about things is the answer to everything, and I think sometimes book it, right, take a risk, it's to make a proposal, suggest something new in the relationship that you can do together, or somewhere new you can go together. You can try it. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the new routine. It could be a bit of sampling or experimentation. I suppose that's the other way I think of behavior change as well. So what's the downside cost? If there isn't a great downside cost, you could try it and see what it's like, just holding that a bit more loosely, rather than not meaning to contradict the sort of sense of I'm a runner or whatever now, but there is something about, like, let's deal with today, or let's deal with this sort of shorter time frame. If I can do it today, you can probably do it tomorrow.
Yeah, seeing it as a set of experiments almost that
Sure.
we're working towards a goal. We've got no real idea necessarily what's going to work best for us. We'll try arrange different things out and see what sticks. But
Yeah.
even that can be an identity thing. It can be you can wear the badge of I'm someone who's working to
Yeah, agree.
improve the relationship. I'm
Yeah.
someone that is up for a bit of trial and error. I'm not going to stay set in my ways. I'm not going to accept the way that things are right now. They're all to
Yeah.
some degree identity points.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the resolutions can be quite small. What I see with couples is often the tone with which they speak to one another is just not one that you would accept from friends or in a professional environment, and you wouldn't have got together with that person if the tone was there. So that would be a thing to fix, right? That would be a thing to take action on, and maybe more important than date night is just how you respond to someone when you don't understand them, or something's gone wrong in the communication, or somebody has forgotten to do something that the other person thought they had promised to do. Like, how will we talk about that? How will we resolve that? And that is not, again, a long conversation. That could just be like, we're much more courteous and open and willing to accept like the bit that we drop the ball on.
So if I was to challenge, generally that would sounds a bit vague. Just going back to your point that
Yep.
resolutions can be a bit vague. You often will often work with couples where they're arguing a bit too much and they're being a bit sharp with each other, and they'll make commitments not to be sarcastic or
Yep.
sharp with each other, and then they fall into those traps again. Often, I think because they don't quite know the granularity of what
Yeah.
they're really meaning in those
Yeah,
moments.
no, I think it's fair. I think of two sort of mental models. One is, are you saying it as an adult rather than as a kind of nagging or hectoring parent, as if you're speaking to a child? And are you receiving it as an adult rather than as a child, or rather as a parent who is going to, put the other one down in response to that? So I think that would be a way of checking like how you're communicating the thing and how you're receiving that. Are you basically in adult to adult mode, and are you acknowledging the other person's point of view? That sort of ABC. Can you build on that is the B of the ABC, and then is there anything you want to challenge back on? So as a rough sort of rule of thumb, it's not like challenge and instantly contradict,
Yeah.
or challenge on the facts. The order is, you acknowledge what's being said to you. It's not to say you agree, simply acknowledge what's being said to you. Is there any way you can get alongside that? If somebody is saying to you, I don't know, you're always stuck at work, or I hardly ever see you anymore, can you hear that as something which is that person wants to see a bit more of you? Can you also say that you're fed up with being stuck at work, for example, or you
Yeah.
miss Thursday nights together? And then can you say, sometimes that's not fair. Sometimes I do come home, and
Yeah.
then you have.
Whereas what we see is most people are leaping to the sea, right? Most people are
Sure.
leaping to
Yeah.
the challenge, which is, well, last Monday I was back at 5 p.m. and
Yeah.
most Tuesdays I'm back to
Yeah.
take care of the kids by 6. And they get
Exactly.
into a
Yeah.
conversation about facts, which is not helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say those are all sort of tone things, and then within that, I mean, you can do those sort of mental models, and you can trick it. You can adopt a somewhat sarcastic tone, or you can speak down to somebody. Those are sort of subtle ways. And sometimes the example I give to couples is, would you genuinely speak to your key client at work in the way you've just spoken to your partner here in this session? And the answer is almost always no. If I'm picking up something which feels abrasive or feels demeaning in some way, like the other person is on the receiving end of that, they might have heard that 100 times. It no longer sort of seems to register, but there is a level at which those things always register, and I think they're worth working on. I think there's a real contrast between how people talk to friends and even other family members and their partner, and they're somehow
Mm.
baked in that this is custom and practice, it's ordinary, it's what you do, there's nothing that can be done about it. So I would look to those the sorts of habits, like when we talk to one another, not necessarily when we're having a fun conversation, because those are probably okay, aren't they, when we're winning and everything's going our way. But when it breaks down, when there's a rub, when something's gone askew, what do you do in those situations?
Let's say a bit more, if we can, about adult to adult communication, because I think some people listening to this might take that as one really helpful kind of New Year's, quite specific New
Yeah.
Year's resolution they want to take into their own relationship. You kind of touched on some of it, but how would someone know if they're in an adult place rather than either a kind of parentifying place or a childlike place? It's something about, even if you're feeling quite emotional, even if you've got a lot of feelings, you're still able to communicate from a more logical, measured place. There's something about
Yeah.
asking for what you want rather than trying to have a go at the other person.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know whether an example helps, but I think if somebody was coming at you hot, you could still say something, you could recognize that and what it was doing to you, but from a more adult place, which is like, I find on these occasions, like
Yeah.
you're tone is really harsh, or you're speaking to
Yeah,
me like I'm an idiot,
yeah,
or even I think it just a sort of noticing of those things. I think
yeah,
the calibration will be slightly different for everybody. I think you do have a sense in your bones of when somebody is kind of speaking quickly and maybe like slipping with their words, or they're coming at you in a way where you could end the sentence with "you an idiot" in brackets or whatever it is. I think
yeah,
you've got a sense of that, and I think if that's coming at you, I would always encourage couples to just notice that and draw a line. Like you're not going to get any further if like that is the tone. I think you probably need to stop and check that at that point. And if you can fix it up in the moment, terrific. But if you can't, like if like it's got a bit too hot, I would probably just press pause on that conversation. I don't
yeah,
feel like you're coming at this in the way that we agreed or the way that we said we would. It
yeah,
feels like you're doing X and Y, like,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
the other person is either going to say, "You're right, that's,
yeah,
fair. Thanks for calling that out. I don't love
yeah,
hearing it, but, you've got a point. Let me go again." Or, "Yeah, I am. And I'm absolutely furious. And we need to stop this conversation
yeah.
before and those, I mean, it's not a
Or
win, but it's the
potentially,
sort of nil-nil draw, isn't it? Away from home. Go back and do it again. Go back and do it later
I
in the
guess
season.
some of what I see is at that point, the other person saying something along the lines of, "No, I'm not. I
Sure.
didn't do that. I'm still angry. Let's continue." And then they carry on, carry on, carry on.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I
sure.
guess what
Sure.
you're saying at that point, the other person who feels like they're more in that adult place can just draw a line under it and say, "No, you're not. You might think you are, but I recognize that I can't talk to you when you're like this. You said
Yeah.
you would do it. We need to finish this conversation now."
Yeah, something like that, isn't it? Yeah, and I think almost as few words as possible in those situations,
Yeah,
because when somebody's really het up,
yeah, they're not hearing you.
I think if somebody's het up again and again and again and really playing no part in those conversations of dealing with that in a constructive way, it's probably time to head for the hills, isn't it? That would be an indication that the relationship isn't working. Usually, what I find with couples who've bothered to come to therapy, that they will recognize that. They will. Sometimes it will take almost the duration of a session for them to acknowledge that they're being unreasonable, but they will acknowledge an unreasonableness like within that
Mm.
time frame. And certainly they often would go away and reflect on that and be like, you know what, that wasn't right. I think people do know, I don't know at what sort of level, but they do know that that was unreasonable.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a tough thing to change. I think it's worth
I
saying that. But
agree.
these
Yeah.
resolutions, if someone's saying, for example, I'm going to make a resolution to try and not get pissed off when my partner does X, Y, and Z, I think with baked into those resolutions is an
Yeah.
understanding that that's a big ask and that
I,
you're
I, I
really going
completely
to
I
get it
completely
wrong
agree. Yeah, I
loads.
completely
So
agree.
it's a bit different to a resolution in your personal life where you're saying every Monday I've carved out space to go to the gym
Yeah.
and created my environment such that that's quite easy.
Yeah.
I think at kind of 9 a.m. on a Friday when you've both had a couple of glasses of wine and you're both a bit prickly and are both
Yeah.
tired,
Yeah.
that's a harder ask in a relationship to shift your behavior. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Yeah.
about
Yes. Yeah.
permission to get it wrong and permission to say sorry and permission to pick it up again on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. I think it's you're back to habit change, aren't you? And habit change is really, really difficult. Habit change in any domain of life. I think of it often through the lens of addiction, and it's very, very difficult to stop doing something that you are habituated to and that feels compulsive for you. And you might want to get in touch with what the cost of that is. You might want to anticipate what the rock bottom moment is, or you might just want to do some practical stuff when you get it wrong. You might want to do the next right thing, which would usually be to say, "Sorry, I've been an absolute idiot," or like, "You're right, I did speak in a way that we'd agreed not to, and I'm sorry about that. I'm finding this process quite slow, hard,
Mm,
acting, but I do want to stick with it." And I think when that's offered in good faith, most
mm,
people on the receiving end, if they're serious about
mm,
improving the state of the relationship, will hear that for what it is. That's a sincere apology. It really pissed me off when you did it. Like, it's the third time this week you've done it, but I hear you saying sorry. I hear you saying you want to do better next time, and I'm still in. I'm not going to the divorce lawyers on Monday morning.
mm.
What do you think about that? Are you buying that or not?
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about a slightly different situation, I guess.
I mean, I'm not terribly sympathetic to people who tell me that's hard, because Sure. I mean, it's a statement of the obvious, isn't it? I think you're dealing with a sort of gravitational pull. There is a default and a tendency to do what you've always done in those situations. So to say it's hard to me is not to say very much that's that interesting. It's really hard, if you want my honest opinion. So's getting fit, so's moderating your calorie intake, so's a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff.
I guess I was thinking about whether you think it's useful to try. So one of the big questions, you'll know more about this than me, coming from more of an addiction background. The question of kind of what does the substance or the behavior offer you that gives you something can be a helpful question to wrestle with. So someone that's getting pissed off in an argument, for example, and cuts down their partner, or there's some character assassination, or there's some harsh words, that's probably offering them something that they've learned from somewhere. It makes them
Yeah,
feel big, it makes them feel strong, it makes them feel
sure. Yeah,
right. So
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
righteousness to it.
yeah.
I'm wondering whether you think there's anything kind of useful in that understanding, or whether just the behavioral stance of just, you know what, doesn't really matter, you just need to cut it out, whether
Yeah.
that's the more useful stance.
I think it's a really interesting question. It's probably the subject of a separate pod, isn't it? I think honestly, for most people, it's a cut it out. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
would do. It's the thing we talk about. I was going to say she was a famous therapist. I mean, she's famous if you do what we do. She's not famous to anybody listening. Marsha Lynham, who's attributed with is connected with dialectical behavioural therapy, which is a sort of form of cognitive behavioral therapy, and she is very direct with people on that point, on angry clients who are angry with her or angry with the receptionist when they make a booking or when they show up at her clinic or whatever, and her stance is cut it out. That phrase that you use, this doesn't do you any good. It may have occasionally got you what you wanted when you come up against somebody who is scared of you, but they won't want to do repeat business with you. It mostly goes wrong. You can end up in a world of pain by doing this, and I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to be made to feel in fear of you or worry about what you're going to do in the consulting room. So cut it out. And you and I probably don't deal with many people who are that dysregulated and can't manage their temper or anger in quite that way. But I would say it's a similar stance in a relationship. And I would also say,
What just to bring that into resolution territory then. So someone says, I'm going to try and cut out my anger. What does that even look like as a resolution? What you are, as their kind of couples therapist, asking them to do in those moments? You're asking them to what? Kind of try and create just that microsecond of space between stimulus and response, right?
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Trying to create a millisecond of, I'm about to say that thing, I'm going to just bite my tongue
Yeah.
and leave the room if I need to,
Yeah,
just
sure.
take
Sure.
a breath or whatever
Yeah,
it
yeah,
might be.
yeah, exactly that. And for some people, they want to do some work on that. They want to know where it comes from. They think that there's a separate task in therapy for them to address that point, and that's fine. That's a really sensible response to it. If that's going to help you, and you're going to be able to make progress on that. But there still is a behavioural impediment. I'm just a little skeptical that those people go through all domains of their life feeling free to play out that sort of anger. Occasionally, people do, but those people have usually ended up in prison or something like that. People who can contain it at work, and then you can contain it somewhere else, right? If you wouldn't do that, and sometimes I find clients who are rude to their partner but not rude to me, and it's like, well, you're not being rude to me. I know I don't mean the same as your partner means to you, but if you can rein it in here when I get it wrong or waste your time or charge you too much money or occasionally start a session late, then you can do that elsewhere. Like, you genuinely can do that, and it is, I think, it is worth being pushed on that point.
And as the partner on the other side, kind of asking for that behavior that you've seen in other spheres of your partner's life, right? That you can be assertive. You can say, when you go to my in-laws, you don't speak to me like that. Like, when you come to my parents, you don't
Yeah.
speak to me like that. So why speak to me like that when you're
It's a good example, and it probably clarifies what we're talking about, because we're not talking about somebody who would do that in public. Like, that's a different
No,
kind
you
of
don't do it when
relationship.
we're out with friends in the pub together. You're not speaking to me like that. But as soon as we get behind closed doors, you feel somehow that it's acceptable. And
Yeah, or whenever we row, or whenever you don't get your own way, or whenever you're tired, or whenever that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think all of that is up for grabs. I mean, there will probably be something to be said to the other partner as well. Like, what's their role in this? That's the interesting bit about couples therapy, isn't it? It's never a one-way street. Somebody else is taking a stance in that relationship and at those moments, and often I see people check out, close down, sort of zone out in that
Mm.
situation. And that causes the person to repeat what they're saying ad infinitum or with increasing volume or ferocity. So there is something going on between them at that point. There's a little bit about coming back to those models. Like, did you ask for the thing you wanted in an adult way? And did you genuinely expect to get it heard and received in that way? And then are we going through that kind of stepped model of acknowledging what's being said? Because sometimes a person who is doing the shouting is not being met with very much. They're being met with passivity or something, which is, can be an aggressive form of response in itself. Passive aggressive is thrown around as a term all the time now, isn't it? But there is an aggressive response in passivity, in not
Mm.
responding, in closing something down, in not responding in a way that says, I can see why this is starting to really matter to you. I would also say, like, weirdly, it's being more assertive and going at things sooner. And I think this is where you and I sometimes sort of see the world a little bit differently. But the person who's going to get red hot angry would do much, much better to get in and deal with it early. So if something feels like an infraction or it feels like they've been treated poorly, that's the moment to say, I didn't like that. I didn't care for that. Can I just draw this to your attention? Whether it's a service encounter in the world or something in the relationship, rather than let that get built upon and built upon and built upon, and then
Mm.
you're coming up here, aren't you? You're going up through the sort of 1 2 3 of probably green. I can speak about it and say why I'm annoyed at this, the kind of amber of 4 5 6, and then you're into that really red hot bit. And I think once you're up there, anyone in the world has a great deal of difficulty then saying what it is they want, why they're feeling like they're feeling, in a way
Yeah.
that someone else can hear. So I'm saying to those people, like, you're still going to be talking about all of the things that matter to you very much, but you're going to be doing so in a much more constructive way, at a much earlier point, and it's going to give you a much greater chance of being heard. So it is cut it out, but it's like we can do something so much more constructive and helpful with these
Mm.
feelings that will get you much closer to what you want than if you just let it all go and then get furious.
Yeah. And that
And
could be
often
quite long
anger
term.
kind of baffles the people who are angry. I don't know how it happened. I just suddenly flipped.
Yes,
I just
exactly.
lost my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, yeah. And they might need quite a bit of help to understand why they did flip, like what has built up to that point, and what is that flipping out actually about, and how do you
Sure.
articulate that need at a much earlier stage? Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that. For me, the only disagreement there is about how often you're doing it. Are you doing it
yeah,
so often that your partner feels like they're just getting a million things wrong a day, and you're just
yeah,
constantly coming at them with problems? That's the only. I see
yeah,
that dynamic from time to time, and there's something there about picking your battles and about how much are you going to own responsibility for some of that rather than placing it on your partner.
yeah, yeah.
Things.
I agree. I think it sort of comes out of our natural temperament and personality, doesn't it? I think I'm much more given to impatience and much more sympathetic to the people who
Yeah,
find it hard to manage their anger and are, irritated by
yeah.
small things. And I think you're, yeah, if I may say,
You
I think
sweat the small
you're
stuff.
a calmer kind
Yeah.
of guy. But I think the risk for you would be that you sit on it, that you harbor resentment,
Yeah,
you
underneath
up
this
on
calm,
things.
cool exterior is a seething pot of vicious and horrible emotions that if you say the wrong thing, Matt, you are going to be on the recipient of. So tread carefully would be my advice. The thing I'm thinking about while you were talking is slightly separate, but is the whole idea of resolutions requires some confrontation with difficult stuff to begin with. So
Yeah,
you might have to confront in your personal life. I feel unfit. I want to get fitter. I need to accept that I'm not as fit as I want. I need to accept that I'm drinking a bit too much alcohol.
sure.
I think that's even harder for a couple because one of the resolutions might be we want to have some more sex. Like, how do we have more sex in our
Yeah,
relationship? And to actually vocalize that and confront it with each other can feel really hard to do.
yeah,
And if you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
extrapolate that across the entire relationship, let's be honest, we're irritating each other quite a lot more than we were this time last year.
Yeah.
Let's do a bit of an MOT on that and see what we can do to improve that. I think a lot of couples before they even get to couples therapy have not even done that kind of work. So
Yeah,
they turn up and they're like, we're not where we were. Well, what does that mean? They haven't really had that conversation about like what's gone wrong, where
yeah,
what
agreed.
what would they want to improve?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking of an example when I tell people what I do in a social setting. Usually tell them I'm a psychotherapist, and they say, "Oh, how interesting!" is a sort of typical response. What type of clients do you see, or you must get to hear all sorts, or those kind of responses. Usually, like,
You can read my mind.
moderately intrigued, and
Moderately intrigued. I love it.
and then the conversation sort of goes, it changes the tone of the conversation when I say I mostly see couples, actually, particularly if I'm talking to a couple, and that makes them freeze because they thought I was going to tell them about young people experiencing exam stress, or finding their way through their first relationship, or all these young people are so flaky these days, aren't they? They're not like us, or they're thinking about depression, or they're thinking about more mental health issues at the sharp end, or those sorts of things. Think about someone who's chronically depressed, and all of that feels a bit out there and a bit away, and not really having much to do with them. And then when I say I talk to couples, that's a different kind of conversation, right? And I'm not talking to couples who are on the cusp of divorce all the time. Sometimes I am, but often not. And it's so hidden away, I think, what couples do in private and how they struggle. I think therapy itself is no longer such a taboo, but I think couples therapy still is. It still
Yes.
feels like it's got a special
Yeah.
sort of category around it, that you only do it as the
Yeah.
precursor to divorce, and it's a bit shameful when when you've gotten to that point. I think almost always the couple don't want to be there, or one of
Yeah.
the couple doesn't want to be in the room. That would be my experience of couples therapy.
Yeah, I agree. And that couple you're talking about at the party are probably both sitting there thinking, "Oh crap, is he going to see what I want
Mm.
him to see?" And maybe I don't even want my partner to see.
Yeah, yeah.
There's an element of kind of, we haven't even gone there. I haven't even talked to her about it. I haven't even talked to him about it. What are we going to do if he does spot this thing that's there that we don't want to confront?
It's quite a sort of quickly change the conversation sort of
Yeah.
moment. And particularly if I was like giving them an example, sometimes people will probe, and I'll say, well, the thing that surprises me that I see a lot of is how much sexlessness there is in
Yes.
marriages and relationships, for example. And I
Yes.
wouldn't do that very often with people, because it is bracing, even in a conversation, because they're immediately thinking something about their own sex life, the last time they did it, how long it's been since they've like, those things are, I think, really arresting, but it's a very obvious sort of barometer or marker. It's usually a window into the relationship, isn't there? I think it's a guy called Ian Kellner who's written a book called So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex, or Tell Me the Last Time You Had Sex. And he uses that almost as an opening question in sessions, because it's such a window onto the couple's life, who initiates, what goes wrong, where the disappointments are. It sort of I personally don't think it carries all of the meaning in a relationship, and I wouldn't index on that like
No.
as
No.
highly as he does.
Yeah.
But I think it is a great, it is a great window in. I
Mm.
have yet to meet a couple who say they've got a terrific varied and regular sex life that they both enjoy, and they've got a bunch of other problems, you know,
Right.
which
Right.
usually they're bound up, huh?
Mm. Mm. Good. Any resolutions for us before we finish?
I should talk less, I think.
I think you should unleash the seething pot of horrible emotions within me somehow. I think you should exhaust me enough that our listeners have to tolerate that from time.
Tolerate that. Good
Yeah,
grief.
yeah. Maybe at
Right.
some point we should let someone else join these conversations as well.
Yeah, you were wondering about that, weren't you?
Yeah,
Whether we might bring some
yeah. Mainly because I'm just sick of hearing your voice. To be perfectly honest, we should get someone else on.
understandable. Right.
Good.
Nice
Happy
to
New
see
Year,
you.
Matt.
You too.
Take care.